Ria Bera, an independent research scholar studying the intersections of education, language and philosophy. I have a question for you all. What links the philosophical groves of Plato's Akadēmía, the magical castle of Hogwarts, and even the open-air, unadorned educational space of Tagore's Vishwa in India? I know it might sound a little weird, but an actual connection exists. Across millennia and differences of habit and language, all these institutions share a similar pedagogical DNA. In the next 20 minutes, we will embark on a transatlantic, time-traveling journey to trace a fundamental blueprint for education, focusing on communal living, student-teacher relationships, and embodied learning. However, the analysis will not only be superficial or celebratory. It will also aim to reflect the perpetuating prejudices inherent in these systems. Therefore, without further ado, let's get into this. My topic of research today is differences of habit and language, reflection of Plato and Tagore's pedagogical beliefs in Harry Potter. So let's begin. Hogwarts as a magical school is not merely a product of imagination by Rowling, but its foundation bears affinity to Plato's Akadēmía, while its concept of the institution as world home or universal inclusivity finds correspondence in Rabindranath Tagore's Vishwa Bharati Gurukul system. However, the reflection of these ideas within the contemporary domains of utopian imaginative storytelling reveals the mindful reconceptualization of both classical and Indian holistic education system in the apparently children's tale of the Harry Potter series. In this context, the study dives into understanding how the mentioned classical and Indian schooling systems are still relevant. Furthermore, it also aids in understanding the incipient drawbacks of these established pedagogical models. Drawing upon Michel Foucault's theory of discipline and power, Sara Ahmed's institutional diversity, along with Tagore's holistic education, this paper scrutinizes the utopian models of education underlying Hogwarts' pedagogical infrastructure, highlighting how these models both empower students and promote malpractices like discrimination and inequalities. As such, this paper aims to contribute to the ongoing research on educational reforms, depicting how even the carefully curated aspirational models of education unintentionally entrench harm to its pupils. Superficially, little similarity exists among Plato's Akadēmía, Tagore's Vishwa Bharati, and Rowling's Hogwarts. However, a detailed analysis of the same reveals similar determination of providing integrated education to nurture students' emotional, intellectual, and moral development. Plato's pedagogical model is founded upon the paideia, or consolidated harmonious refinement, gained through the cultivation of philosophy and mathematics with physical training and artistic pursuits like music and poetry. The main aim is to mold students into kalos kagathos, or noble individuals to benefit the polis or city-state. Likewise, Vishwa Bharati has always focused on reinstating among its pupils a knowledge of their own natural heritage and natural world. Consequently, the guiding principle is Yatra Vishwa Bhavate Kanda, or as Chakravarti et al. Mentions, where the world makes a home in a single nest. This ensures inclusivity and commitment towards holistic development, for which Tagore developed 5 principles, still followed in the contemporary times. These include learning in nature about nature, practical learning through community service, spiritual and moral development, incorporating art and culture with general education, and finally, disintegrating social barriers and promoting equality and humanistic education, as Panduka Karunankai mentions. The common thread that runs through Tagore's journey is his commitment to humanistic education. Though Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry is a postmodern imaginary institution, it perfectly amalgamates the pedagogical ideas of these mentioned schools. Like Akadēmía, Hogwarts' curriculum embodies paideia, or holistic education, through its 7 obligatory and 8 optional courses, like astronomy, herbology, divination, Muggle studies, and others. This promotes self-awareness along with the insight into nature of things, as Rakovic mentions. Furthermore, occasional oral lectures by the headmaster, Dumbledore, also provides and develops students' morale, as evident in Dumbledore's statement like, "It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends," in the first book, highlighting the need for integrity and moral courage, since bravery is not just depicted through actions, but also through moral choices. Another similarity lies in the structured disciplinary framework followed by Akadēmía and Hogwarts. The selection process at the former was strict and exclusive, preferring aristocrats with a natural propensity for mathematics and philosophy, as Plato's motto as mentioned by Nicole, was let none but geometrists enter here. Whereas Hogwarts only admits students with intrinsic magical aptitude, excluding muggles and scripts. The students are pre-selected by the pill of acceptance, which registers the spell at their birth. And on arriving at school, the sorting hat stratifies them into different houses based on their skills. Gryffindor comprises the brave at heart, Hufflepuff are just and loyal, Ravenclaw comprises a ready mind, while Slytherins include the cunning folk. Hogwarts, in terms of educational atmosphere, bears both similarities and differences with Tagore's Vishwa Bharati, modeled on the ancient Gurukul system, embodying comprehensive teaching by immersive environmental education. The most striking similarity lies in the open-air teaching. Tagore, since Vishwa Bharati's inception, has believed that education must transit rigid walls to develop a genuine association with ecology and develop conservation strategies. As mentioned by himself in his essay, My School, I tried my best to develop in the children of my school the freshness of their feelings for nature, a sensitiveness of the soul in their relationship with the human surroundings, with the help of literature, festive ceremonials, and also the religious teachings. Tagore's curriculum included, besides academics, music and picture making, dramatic performances, tending the vegetable garden, weaving, and also small repairs, as mentioned by himself in his essay, My School. He agreed with Wordsworth that the natural surroundings ensure spontaneous and inevitable interconnectedness with humanity, absent in the rigid classroom education. Accordingly, one major aim of Vishwa Bharati still remains to this day is to incorporate the method of nature for students' unconscious learning. This allows students to explore the world firsthand and connect with the known and unknown. As Tagore himself mentions again in the same essay, they must be trained but to be the makers of their own world and their own destiny. Hogwarts' curriculum follows the same method to enrich students' skills, physical and mental abilities as well. Though they do not engage in weaving or gardening, the academics, practical arts and communal activities like the Yule Ball and Quidditch are all directed at integrated development. Furthermore, herbology and care of magical creatures conducted in open grounds and the greenhouses provide sustainable ecological education, much alike to Tagore's gardening. In this regard, CP notes that such education imparts that knowledge in all living organisms have a value in life. The study of charms and transfiguration also teaches repairing disintegrated artifacts to promote self-sufficiency. Furthermore, assemblages like the choir and the dueling club also nurture the students' musical and defensive capabilities. The embodiment of the institution as a living, breathing space itself acting as a teacher and or guide has also been another shared ideology among Plato, Tagore, and Rowling. Plato promoted imparting dialogues in a more natural space and open-air grove devoted to the hero Akadēmos. Such education allowed freedom of the mind to develop philosophical knowledge along with intellectual and moral learning. As evident from Plato's Phaedrus, here is this lofty and spreading plant tree and the chaste tree, high and in full bloom and fragrance. Judging from the status and offerings, this must be a place sacred to Aeschylus and nymphs. Tagore has also believed that a person's entire development is possible through certain freedom of action rather than dictation. To ensure this, Tagore developed the Chhatim Tola, a sanctuary of Saptaparni trees whose leaves signify blessing and scholarly humility, as a haven for students' reciprocal education with nature. Following Tagore's ideals, pupils, even in the contemporary times, associate with altering seasons and weathers to nurture their minds and collectively work to give back to the community. In this regard, Karlekar mentions that this is considered to be the most sacred place within the ashrama, where his father, Maharishi Rabindranath, used to meditate. The lesson imparted at Chhatim Tala not only provided practical education, but is a direct revolt against the colonial system of education with its rigid frameworks. The lesson imparted at Chhatim Tala not only provided practical education, but is a direct revolt against the colonial system of education with its rigid frameworks, which has been compared with a kind of food which contains only one particular ingredient needful for our vitality, but dried in and packed in things, as Tagore himself mentions. Besides, the Tapovana, or the forest for meditation, also contributes to students' spiritual development, along with serving as a place for economic cooperation for self-sustainment and industrial mindset, engaging the academic community, as Tagore says, in a living and active bond of necessity. In this context, Tagore mentions the utility of Tapovanas in the center of our Indian culture as our Tapovanas, which were our natural universities, were not abstracted from life. There our masters and students lived their full life, they gathered their fruits at will, and the spiritual education which the students had was a part of the spiritual education. Its very existence should depend upon the success for industrial ventures carried out on cooperative principles. Like its counterparts, Hogwarts also embodies a living entity more profoundly. The institution not only is an entirely open space, but which acts as a teacher and guide through its kinetic staircases, informative portraits, and the room for requirement, which provides necessary infrastructure for the wizard's development. This is evident through Dumbledore's statement, help will always be given at Hogwarts to those who ask for it. Furthermore, the artifacts like the Mirror of Ersed and Waterer's Map also provide moral lessons and protect students from getting lost either in the internal delusions or in Hogwarts itself. Dumbledore's moral statement to Harry in Sorcerer's Stone emphasizes this, where he says, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live, remember that. Highlighting how the mirror reflects unfulfilled desires, making students perceptibly realize the gap between desire and reality. Additionally, the Forbidden Forest, a fearful and dark area, though restricted for students, is used as a supervised punishment to expose pupils to dangers and fear, to make them associated with creatures like centaurs, to develop courage and learn about the unknown. In this regard, Rajik and Shomosi praise the method of practical teaching since it provides the opportunity to experiment and practice the topics that are to be learned. A similar paradoxical learning scope is also provided by the restricted third floor corridor on the right, where no student must enter who does not wish to die a very painful death. These challenges concealed within the corridor embody hidden curriculum at Hogwarts which aids in confronting one's inner fears. Furthermore, through these methodological challenges, the professors impart lessons on the probable perils of unbridled curiosity. However, Jurentic expresses her concerns regarding this teaching systems since she believes that the students' natural curiosity will push them to explore the possible adventure-like locations, leading them to dangerous situations. This is even evident from Dumbledore's conversation with Harry at the end of Sorcerer's Stone, where he mentions, the effort involved nearly killed you. For one terrible moment there, I was afraid it had. However, Hogwarts sometimes practices dangerous activity-based learning, like the Triwizard Tournament. It is a community-based friendly competition among the wizarding schools of Europe involving activities designed for testing different aspects of an individual. Through this, individuals correspond with the nature and learn through hands-on challenges as mirrored in Tagore and Plato's pedagogical ideals. In this context, Dumbledore points out the main aims of the tournament, testing 3 types of holistic development. There will be 3 tasks, and they will test the champions in 3 different ways: their magical prowess, their daring, and the powers of deduction, and of course, their ability to cope with danger. However, the awareness of danger in the task and the death toll prompts Dumbledore to set an age limit to 17 years or older. A salient point is that the students are always taught to treat death not as a danger or as the culmination of life, but as the next great adventure. Such activity-oriented learning, though not dangerous, follows Tagore's Vishwa Utsav or the Tree Planting Festival, which even contemporarily promotes environmental awareness by testing physical skills like digging, creative ability like preparing aesthetic performances, and community development skills with collaborative efforts. Yet, a closer analysis of the text of Harry Potter reveals how, under the guise of equality, unity, and inclusivity, their love biases, discrimination, and social pressures, sometimes corresponding and sometimes diverging from the other discussed models, illuminating how even utopian educational models contain imperfections. Such prejudices are most evident in sorting students by traits like bravery, cunning, intellect, and loyalty, undermining the actual aim, which is unity. It promotes internal divisions as the houses act as something like your family within Hogwarts, as McGonagall mentions. Accordingly, the house points and house cup develop more enmity through grouping instead of collaboration. Likewise, Quidditch also promotes staunch rivalry along with highlighting safety concerns because of the lack of a proper framework. Therefore, Hassan et al. Mentioned that Quidditch is an educational program becomes difficult to understand or to reap benefits from. Such discriminatory practices can be better explained through Sara Ahmed's theory of institutional diversity work, as mentioned in her book on Being Included, Racism and Diversity in Institutional Life. She states that sometimes saying diversity can be a way of not doing diversity, highlighting the disparity between rhetoric and implementation. It indicates how institutions rhetorically promote diversity by talking of equal opportunities and treatment of students without actually implementing it. For instance, in Akadēmía, the discrimination comprises excluding slaves, women, and non-elite students, while Hogwarts includes marble and square exclusion, blood hierarchies, house segregation, and politic selection biases. The discourse of discrimination even dates back to the foundation of Hogwarts, as is evident from Professor Bryn's account to the students. For a few years, the founders worked in harmony together, but then disagreements sprang up between them. Slytherin wished to be more selective about students. He believed that magical learning should be kept within all magic families. Such prejudiced behavior diverges from Tagore's notion of world home, which promotes equal treatment but shows strikingly likeness with Plato's Akadēmía, since Plato has always preferred aristocratic male students within his institution, despite promoting inclusivity. This is evident by the admission of only 2 women, Axiothea and Lasthenia, in his institution, as Zola confirms that Plato spoke of equality only for an elite group, with opportunities open only to elite women. Although Hogwarts also claims complete inclusivity, underlying gender disparities persist in candidate selection. For instance, dwelling or combating clubs are male-dominated. Accordingly, in Quidditch also, female chasers are quite rare, as only Angelina Johnson, Cho Chan, and Ginny Weasley can be seen as the female players. Additionally, all 3 discussed pedagogical models tend to subvert students' will to the institutional ideas and preserve their standards. As such, students encounter extreme psychological pressure leading to self-alienation and anxiety. In Plato's Akadēmía, the main focus was on Socratic anamnesis, or recollection of knowledge not independently discovered but recalled, since the soul already possessed it from earlier experiences, as mentioned in Plato's Phaedo and Meno. Therefore, students were guided to reach a predetermined truth, although they were allowed independent reasoning. A similar pressure of conforming to ideas like purity, selflessness, and devotion to community development is viewed in Vishwa Bharati as well, which restricts free expression and authentic identities. In this regard, Chakraborty states that despite being aware of these issues, professors and stakeholders choose to ignore them, since the more they remain indifferent to the sources of decay, the more secure will be their futures. A compulsory association with nature as an undeniable mission is also mentioned by Tagore's essay As Poet's School, where he states, in order to be real, it must find its reincarnation under modern conditions of life and be the same in truth, not merely identical in fact. Such pressures not only persist in children's literature, such as Harry Potter series, but also get intensified. Though the sorting hat teaches the students, let us be one, not divided by our houses, the housing system requires students to conform to grouping based on specific abilities, exerting psychological pressures. Throughout the series, both Ron Weasley and Neville Longbottom strive to embody bravery and uphold their family norm, being placed in the courage-oriented Gryffindor. As name states, Neville's familiar expectations impede his development, making him nervous and impacting his learning negatively. Even Harry himself is forced to participate in the dangerous Triwizard tournament against his will. Conspicuously, unlike Vishwa Bharati, both Akadēmía and Hogwarts provide knowledge not merely for educational purposes, but primarily for achieving institutional aims. For instance, in Plato's Akadēmía, learning is not an end in itself, but is directed towards developing philosopher kings, since he states in the Georgias, until kings are philosophers or philosophers are kings, cities will never cease from ill. Such mentioned disciplinary systems are not accidental, but corresponds to Michel Foucault's theory of discipline and power. This operates on the principle that power in the modern society is not exerted through brutal reinforcements, but through regulations or multiplicity of minor techniques, or disciplines from different sources. This theory applies to all the mentioned institutions who regulate people through examinations and house point systems as mentioned in Hogwarts. As Rani upholds, it keeps students under the watchful eyes or panopticon prison. For instance, the examination system at Hogwarts implements potentially, essentially by arranging objects, while the house points provide a panopticon view of the students to ensure their rule-abiding. On the other hand, in Plato's Akadēmía, power operates not just through examinations but through judgment and the threat of failure, since the curriculum was devoted to a state-controlled 25 years practice to develop a philosopher king, an epitome of human perfection, where failure at any point would lead to the student's exclusion, as mentioned in the Republic. Similarly, in Vishwa Bharati, though Tagore propounded freedom for students, at present, coercive regulations are imposed leading to mediocrity, indiscipline, and vested interest, shaking the myth of it being a rural utopia. Furthermore, power is operated through communal rituals and choreographed festivals where students are bound to synchronize for harmony development, as mentioned by Ghosh. A sense of judgment and self-regulation always prevails, acting as censors to maintain decorum and thereby conforming to institutional aims and developing an effectively docile body, who can be trained and regulated effectively, as Foucault mentions. Hogwarts, too, like Akadēmía, does not prioritize students' holistic development for its own sake, but to maintain institutional control. The curated curriculum is meant to ultimately benefit the Ministry of Magic by producing skilled magicians working for it to enhance its power. as evident from the ministry's motto itself, which is magic is might. Even Hermione Granger's eventual ascent to Minister of Magic elucidates Foucault's notion of how power reproduces through institutional loyalty instead of coercion. Even Cobb's research illustrates that not only the ministry but the teachers like Dumbledore and Snape have also exerted authoritarian power by trying to control everything that Harry does, thereby showcasing centralized power. Though Hogwarts is built on the ideologies of both Akadēmía and Vishwa Bharati, it transcends their pedagogical ideals, since unlike earlier models it does not remain static but adapts with students' requirements. While both the earlier models prefer intellectual perfection and existential harmony, Hogwarts acknowledges chaos as a pedagogical requirement, providing experimental lessons to children, thereby accepting that failures and dangers are inseparable from true learning. Harry's multiple rule-breaking and negation of certain teachers' authoritarian rule exemplifies this. Unlike Plato, who emphasized intellect, or Tagore, who emphasized spiritual and moral betterment, Hogwarts ensures an amalgamation of both, with magic or imaginative space, to provide an integrated, transactional education to the academic community for everyone's well-being. In retrospect, it is viewed that educational models have never survived in isolation, but inspired one another for achieving a utopian model for the benefit of both the entire academic body. Beginning from the systems of synergetic refinement, all-encompassing curriculum as seen in Plato's Akadēmía to association with nature depicted in Tagore's Vishwa Bharati have been amalgamated in modern schools, including the fictional utopian institutions like Hogwarts. However, a closer scrutiny exposes their imperfections, comprising inequality, discrimination, psychological pressure, and other societal biases which promote more harm through exclusion and anxiety than benefits like promoting empowerment. When such pedagogical models of education are translated onto fiction like Harry Potter series, their imperfections seem more unsettling to contemporary readers and viewers who identify these subtle yet enduring flaws persisting through generations. It reveals how the pedagogical models that provide empowerment can also perpetuate malevolent practices. Therefore, Hogwarts does not only reflect earlier educational models but also highlights the fallibility of utopian pedagogical frameworks, thereby justifying that despite differences of habits and language, no pedagogical institution is exempt from imperfections. Thank you.